My name is Charles DiNarello. I'm professor of medicine at the University of Colorado in Denver, and I am the CEO of a company called Omni Biopharmaceuticals, located also in Denver, Colorado. I became CEO recently when Omni became a public company. Essentially, I am a professor of medicine, and I've done a lot of research in this area called inflammation and cytokines. And in my laboratory several years ago, we made a discovery about a natural molecule called alpha-1 antitrypsin, and this turned out to be an important discovery. And we then wrote a patent for this, the University of Colorado patent. And the University of Colorado then seeks investors, and the investors who were interested in this patent are, in fact, the founders of Omni Biopharmaceuticals. They asked me for what they thought we could do with this patent, and I told them quite clearly that in diabetes, it seemed to be the most obvious use of the patent. There are other indications in the patent besides diabetes, but this was the one indication that I thought was perhaps the most pressing. Why am I so enthusiastic about this project, this testing? The patent's about the use of a natural product called alpha-1 antitrypsin. It's a natural product in the sense that it's made by the body. We use it clinically. It has a 20-year history of safety. It's mostly used to treat patients who don't make enough alpha-1 antitrypsin. And there are major pharmaceutical companies make it, and they make a profit off of it. But we found that alpha-1 antitrypsin, this natural product, could be actually used to treat developing diabetes. And it's a big problem. It's a growing problem. And we offer diabetics nothing but insulin, and the complications of diabetes are quite severe. So if we apply our patent idea, our intellectual property, to testing alpha-1 antitrypsin with a credible safety record, we may in fact find a new use, an important use, for a well-studied drug with a safety record. And the attractive thing about what we're going to do is that there's a 20-year safety record of alpha-1 antitrypsin use in patients with deficiency, and no indication of death, infection, cancer. We give it to children, give it to pregnant women. So unlike all biotech companies, we're not dealing with unknowns. We're just testing something that's been approved for a new indication. And that's what Omni Biopharmaceuticals is all about. It's taking an indication that's novel, a drug that's been approved with a safety record, and applying the intellectual property to treat a disease. If we are correct, and if alpha-1 antitrypsin does halt the immune attack in type 1 diabetes, it'll be a great step forward for medicine. Personally, for me, in terms of my academic credentials, it would be an enormously important step. But for the patients in the company, it would be a huge success. And so I'm very enthusiastic about the company. I've never been a CEO before, but right now my major responsibility is to get the trial started and to do the trials correctly. I leave it to other people to fundraise. We've had no trouble fundraising, but I think eventually, if we get the right answer, Omni Pharmaceuticals will be a very good company. In taking on this responsibility of CEO of a company where most of my time is spent in taking care of patients and in doing basic research in inflammation, Omni is going forward with our intellectual property and testing in diabetes and other indications. Investors obviously have to know everything what could possibly happen in this situation. From my point of view, in terms of safety, there is almost no risk because alpha-1 antitrypsin has been used for 20 years and thousands of patients. Is there a financial risk? I don't see it. I'm not an expert in finances, but essentially we have intellectual property and a patent. We believe the patent, which goes back to 1999 and 2005, is solid. We have lots of data to support it, but as you know, companies are always trying to defeat patents. I personally have been involved in 4 major patent battles as expert witness. in very large patent battles over antibodies to tumor necrosis factor for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. And so I know what happens in these patent battles over intellectual property. And my estimation of our patent and the dates and the data are solid. But for sure, someone will challenge. They always do. That's just the reality. But from my experience, our data are solid and our time is solid. I mean, 1999 was the first mention of alpha-1 antitrypsin in the treatment of diabetes, and in 2005 we expanded that greatly to include organ transplantation and other indications, and we continue to do that. So I think we're in pretty good shape, but I'm sure that somebody who's interested in getting the market away from us would challenge the patent, as they usually do, and hopefully that's not going to waste our resources. In general, biotech companies suffer from two things. They suffer from proof of principle, is their substance going to work or not? And they also suffer from approval. It takes a long time to get something approved. You have to prove it's safe and efficacious. And these days, the approval is costly and very long for new drugs. But we're not in that ball game at all. We're a pharmaceutical company, a biotech company that essentially is dealing with an approved drug, approved by the FDA, with a tremendous safety record. And so our time is condensed only to proof of principle. And if we are correct, and it does work in type 1 diabetes, it's only a matter of a year before we can expand into a large trial and go to the FDA and say, look, it's safe and it works. Approve it. That's something that's not very commonly seen in biotech companies. And what is the return for us? Well, we license our intellectual property. Simple as that. And we live off the royalties that would come from its use. There's another aspect of pharmaceuticals that I would like to discuss. We're not stopping at alpha-1 antitrypsin. That molecule is natural. It's made from human plasma. But there are parts of the molecule we think are functional. And it's possible to take this molecule and cut it up and find out which parts are active and which parts we can use as a new drug. And that puts us in a different ballpark. Assuming that we have sufficient funds from the royalties, we could move into substance of matter patents. And substance of matter patents, of course, take much longer to do clinically, but then it's your own drug. And Omnibio Pharmaceuticals now becomes a drug company as just a company with patents and license agreements. The timeline for FDA approval of a drug for use in a disease, in this particular case, the drug is alpha-1 antitrypsin, the disease, for example, would be diabetes, that could be as short as a year and a half, 2 years. For the simple reason is the drug is available, it has a tremendous safety record, there's no dearth of patients. The safety issue makes it very easy to sign a consent form. So the usual slow progress can be condensed. So we have plenty of patients. It's so safe. No one's going to, with type 1 diabetes, is going to say, I don't want to do this. They're going to say, why not? It's safe. My child's is going to advance to diabetes. If I can save the disease, if I can stop the disease and halt the progression of the disease, it's worth a trial if the stuff is safe. And if it works, then the FDA will say, okay, let's not do 100 patients, let's do 300 patients to make sure it really works. There's no trouble finding the patients. So we think that thing is considerably condensed. Will it work in everybody? I would say, depending upon their stage in early diabetes, remember, we're talking about recent onset diabetes. We're talking about children who are just beginning to get diabetes. And we could salvage, I think that's the best word I can use, salvage their insulin-producing cells by giving alpha-1 antitrypsin, stopping the immune attack, and then allow the islets to function normally. The next question is, if it works in only 20%, given the huge numbers of type 1 diabetes, it's a success already.